Lalo Salamanca's death in the final season of Better Call Saul set the stage for several key plot points in Breaking Bad, but the story would have turned out very differently if he'd survived. When Saul Goodman first appeared in Breaking Bad Season 2, Episode 8, Better Call Saul, Walt and Jesse kidnapped him and took him out into the desert to force him to take Badger's case. There, Saul offhandedly asked if Lalo sent them. At the time, this was a throwaway line suggesting Saul had many past enemies. But it paved the way for one of TV's greatest villains. When Saul got his own spin-off in Better Call Saul, the series gradually built toward the introduction of Lalo. The show eventually revealed that Lalo was a Salamanca who hired Saul as his lawyer, and, occasionally, as his bagman. Lalo's feud with Gus Fring escalated into a series of assassination attempts. Ultimately, Gus managed to kill Lalo, putting a dent in the Salamanca's enterprise and allowing him to corner the drug market. But what if Gus hadn't killed Lalo? How would Breaking Bad have turned out if Lalo was still around when Heisenberg came on the scene? Lalo's survival would have meant Gus' death in Better Call Saul. If Gus hadn't killed Lalo, Lalo would have killed him. After Gus sent a goon squad to Lalo's compound to assassinate him, there was no way to de-escalate the conflict. Their feud was going to end one of two ways: either Gus was going to kill Lalo, or Lalo was going to kill Gus. As seen in Better Call Saul, Gus got the upper hand and shot Lalo dead in the underground lair where he was planning to build his industrial meth lab. This was the only way for Better Call Saul to resolve the conflict, because Gus was around in Breaking Bad and Lalo wasn't, but Gus only narrowly managed to escape death. After sneaking out of his compound during the raid, Lalo returned to New Mexico and hid out in the sewers to obtain video evidence of Gus' disloyalty to the cartel. Lalo was meticulous in his pursuit of Gus and only made one fatal mistake. If Gus' aim was slightly off, he would have missed Lalo and Lalo would have killed him instead. This would have meant that Gus' meth operation would have been over before it began, and he never would have hired Walt and Jesse to cook for him. With Lalo alive and Gus gone, the Salamancas would reclaim their power. Gus kept the Salamancas at bay. Mark Margolis as Hector Salamanca and Tony Dalton as Lalo in Better Call Saul. If Gus was killed and Lalo survived, then the Salamancas would have been able to reclaim their power. Ever since Hector gunned down his partner Max in front of him, Gus was determined to bring down the Salamanca cartel and wipe out the entire family. By the time Breaking Bad begins, the Salamanca's criminal empire is still operational, but it's nowhere near as powerful as it once was, since Gus has dominated most of the market. Eventually, the only Salamanca left is Hector himself, who Gus kept alive to force him to watch the rest of his family die. Walt used Gus' rivalry with Hector against him, and convinced Hector to help him take out Gus with a bomb at his retirement home. But if Lalo had killed Gus, it would have gone the other way around. Gus' massacre of the Salamancas would have been cut short, and it would have been Gus' criminal empire that dwindled away while the Salamancas' operation thrived. When Walt and Jesse started cooking meth, the Salamancas would have a much larger market share. Instead of relying on Gus for stable employment, they'd have to rely on the Salamancas. Walter and Jesse would have had to face Lalo after confronting Tuco. Lalo would have come for revenge. Tuco Salamanca's first appearance in Breaking Bad Season 1, Episode 6 Crazy Handful of Nothing. If Lalo was still alive in Breaking Bad, then Walt and Jesse's interactions with the Salamancas would have gone very differently. At the end of Breaking Bad Season 1, Walt and Jesse struck a distribution deal with Tuco, but it was short-lived. At the beginning of Season 2, Tuco kidnapped Walt and Jesse and took them to his desert hideout. In Season 2, Episode 2, Grilled, while Tuco was planning to take Walt and Jesse to Mexico and force them to cook meth 24/7, Walt and Jesse managed to break free and kill him. After killing Tuco, Walt and Jesse were safe from the Salamancas until Tuco's cousins came to town in the following season. But if Lalo was still alive, they would have faced repercussions for Tuco's death much sooner. Lalo would have been operating in New Mexico and Tuco would have clued him into the distribution deal and the kidnapping plot. Walt and Jesse would have had to answer to Lalo after killing Tuco. That probably wouldn't have ended well, given that Lalo murdered Howard Hamlin and Fred Whalen for a lot less. Without Gus, Walter's operation never becomes that big. Walt had distribution problems before he started working for Gus. Walt and Skyler looking at a pile of money in Breaking Bad. If Gus wasn't around in Breaking Bad, then there's no way Walt's drug operation would have become as massive as it did. From the moment he and Jesse started cooking meth, their biggest problem was distribution. They could produce meth in great quantities out of their RV, but Jesse couldn't move all that product himself. Even if he spent all night slinging crystal by the 10th, the most he could make was a couple of grand, and that was when they weren't getting into trouble with rival dealers for selling on their territory.